Come on. We live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, and welcome to the Edge of Everyday. Are you standing at your own edge? Are you craving deeper conversations? Do you know there's more waiting for you just beyond your comfort zone? If you answered yes to any of those questions, the Edge of Everyday is the place for you. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and tough talk about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. You know, the ones between fear and courage, grief and joy, ambition and vulnerability, change and becoming. Here, we explore contradiction. Here, we hold paradox. We confront the truths we've been taught to ignore. Real talk with real people that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe. The Edge is where you come alive. The Edge of Everyday. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Edge of Everyday. What if healing isn't just about understanding your story, but about remembering a story that began long before you? What if your body is carrying not only your own memories, but the vestiges of memories of those who came before you? And what if ritual isn't some old-fashioned tradition we've outgrown, but a living, pulsating practice that helps us remember who we are, where we've come from, and who we're becoming? Today, we are live in the hive with Dr. Pavini Moray to explore the powerful intersections of embodiment, ancestry, ritual, and belonging. In a culture that teaches us to think our way through life, Pavini invites us to listen to something older, something wiser, the intelligence of the body. Their work bridges somatic psychology, trauma healing, consent, leadership, and ancestral practice, reminding us that healing isn't simply an individual journey. It ripples backward through our lineage and forward to those who will come after us. Their newest book, Tending the Bones, offers a 13-month journey through ritual, embodiment, and ancestral connection, asking not only how we heal ourselves, but how we become good ancestors. So today, we'll explore questions like, what do our bodies remember that our minds have forgotten? Can ritual become a language of healing? And what does it mean to belong, not just to ourselves, but to generations past and generations yet to come? I'm so looking forward to this conversation. But before we dive in, I would like to read Dr. Pavini's bio. Dr. Pavini Moray is a somatic couples coach and relational life therapy practitioner with a PhD in somatic psychology and 15 plus years guiding couples through crisis, betrayal, and reconnection. They are the author of How to Hold Power, Penguin Random House, and Tending the Bones, North Atlantic Books. They are the host of Salty Sweet, a documentary-style podcast following real couples through the work of staying together. Their approach blends somatic psychology, relational science, and a spiritual sensibility delivered with warmth, precision, and zero wellness speak. I love that. Hello, Pavini. Welcome to the Edge of Everyday.
Hello, Sandra. Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight.
It is a delight. It is a true delight to have you on. And folks, I have listened to a lot of Pavini's talks on other channels, podcasts, et cetera, including Amy Lynn Durham. A shout out to Amy Lynn Durham, who just had them on. And I have to say, your like Amy, your relationship work has been, it's been so expanding to listen to.
Mm.
But on this particular episode, I want to focus on tending the bones and your work with ritual and ancestors and embodiment. So, so listeners, you can find all of that relationship work in so many other glorious conversations. And if it comes up, we're going to go with that. But we're going to focus on tending the bones. But before we get there, I want to ask the question that I ask all of my guests. What identity do you, Pavini, lead with?
Oh, it's changed so much over the years.
This is why I adore this question.
Yeah. Where I am right now is that my identities are shortcuts for other people,
Ooh, yes.
right? So I can tell you I'm trans, I'm queer, I'm non-binary, I'm white. I can tell you all of these identities.
Mhm.
They don't really land in me anymore, but it's a way to signal to others, hey, uh, I'm a safer body for you, and I get where you're coming from. And so when I'm using identities at all, that's why I'm doing it with that intention to connect.
I love that. And I love that it changes and changes. And if I were to have you on in the near future, it could be again, we could have
Yeah, it
different.
changes, and I just feel like unattached to identity at this point.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it exactly. And if I think about how I want to answer that question and how my answers have changed through the years, it's exactly that. I
yeah,
don't want to have, I want to be a being that's in service, that
that's
holds
right.
sacred space. And edge walker is how I think of myself. I love that, and I've hinted at it. This is how I know Pavini. I've through Magic Thread Media. Again, a shout out to Amy Lynn. Um, you are soon to have your own podcast, Salty Sweet, at Magic Thread Media. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, and my old podcast, Bespoken Bones, is already there. So,
Oh,
and
I
that
did
might
not
be
know that.
more, yeah, that
Okay,
might be more relevant to this conversation. So I'll just say briefly, Salty Sweet is a new podcast that's launching this year about working my couples work,
right.
and taking real couples through the process so that other people who are listening don't feel so alone,
Yeah.
because relationships can be such um, a place where we front, where we pride on the outside, where we show other people, but then like what's actually going on behind closed doors we don't see. So
Mm,
that's that podcast. But the other podcast is much more about the ancestor work. It's called Bespoken Bones: Ancestors at the Crossroads of Sex, Magic, and Science. And so yeah, it just is newly released on Magic Thread Media. And it was I did it for 3 years, ended just as the pandemic started. Um, Exploring those concepts of ancestors and sexuality and embodiment, and it was a offshoot of my doctoral research around those topics. And I was people for my doctoral research, and my committee was like, hey, you gotta get to it, you gotta get to writing this thing and stop interviewing people. But I loved the interviews so much, and I felt like there was so much value in those
mm,
conversations, because like I feel like now ancestors is more, it's a little bit more mainstream. It's people have had a little bit more exposure to it, but at that time it was like really kind of a fresh conversation, and especially like combining that and trauma and sexuality, and like nobody was talking about that. So I just decided to have those conversations in a podcast format so that I could finish my doctoral work. And that's what happens.
wonderful. Yeah, I that's true. Ancestry work is really much more out there. Although Not so much in my world. I think probably in your world, people are maybe more hip to it, but I think I have a wide spectrum of listeners. So ancestral work may be somewhat newish for them, which I
Ah,
think
that's
is pretty,
exciting.
as well as, I always say this, everyone that I come on, I like to believe that these conversations are for the very well seasoned and the newbies. The way that these conversations can land, keeping that in mind, keeping the answers in mind that serve a wide spectrum of understandings of all of these topics.
So maybe we
So,
should just have a couple of working definitions then. Does
yeah,
that make
that's
sense?
exactly what I was. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay.
and that'll go along. But I want to start with tending the bones. I just, of course, the levels and the juiciness of that title. So, why did you choose that? I mean, I think of bones as the scaffolding of the body off the top of my head for someone who wouldn't necessarily think about that in any kind of ancestral way or mythological way or ritualistic way. But so, what are and I think of the bones as the structure of the body. And if I use that mythology or that metaphor, the bones being what are the structures that hold our lives? So, talk to us why you chose that Tending the Bones as it's not the full title, but as the title of
Yeah.
your book.
It came to me in the 90s, actually, through Clarissa Pinkola Estes uses that phrase. Um, and it's this idea that we are relational with the dead. And so that's one piece of it. Second, that what has happened in the past um, holds a bearing on what is happening now. And so we receive ancestral inheritances, right? Like just like we receive inheritances from our caregivers, possibly if and when they pass, well, they will pass, but and we may or may not receive an inheritance, but we receive lots of other kinds of inheritances, and that those inheritances can be blessings, right? Of like certain skills, like maybe your family's a cooking family and you love to cook and you have lots of ancestral recipes. And also burdens, like maybe you're dealing with addiction and your dad dealt with addiction and his dad dealt with addiction. And so this idea that things get past, both hard things and wonderful things, and the relationship with tending those things that we receive from our families of origin, from our families of care, um, that we can unpack them, that we can either uh, kind of receive those things unconsciously or consciously and work with them. So that's where the title came from, is this idea that like the just because someone has passed, that the relationship remains and we can remain active in that relationship.
Uh, Indeed. And we'll get to more of the ancestral work. But I want to take this step by step for the wide, as we discuss, the wide
Sure.
spectrum of listeners. So thinking about this work, the body, the arc of it, the body, what have we forgotten in this work, in our knowing, in our life? The ancestors, what have we inherited, received, as you mentioned? The ritual, how do we remember? And looking forward, how are we going to be a good ancestor? What legacy are we creating? So I'd like to start with your somatic psychological work. I think that's a word that we're hearing so much, somatic work. Um, Speak to us about what somatic psychology is and how you weave that into your work.
Mhm. I had a client years ago who was a marathon runner and she was always training. And she injured herself. And so this is a person who spends, you know, time every day, hours a week in the craft of running. And she injured herself and was working with a coach to rehabilitate her injury. And I asked her, when you're running, are you paying attention to what's happening in your body? Like, can you feel what's happening? Because that's how it was a repetitive use injury. And she said no. And so here's somebody who has a very physical practice, right? But they're not living an embodied an experience of that practice. They're not living in their body. They're not feeling in their body. So they're doing this very physical thing with their body, but they're not uh, paying attention to it, right? And that was how the injury occurred. And so she was having to learn to put her attention on what was happening as she was running to course correct that. And so when we're talking about somatic work, we're talking about learning to feel the body that holds the life that is us. It seems really simple, but most of us live from the neck up in our heads, not even feeling. And there's lots of good reasons for that, right? There's a lot of good reasons. So this isn't like to judge anybody, but it's just true that a lot of us are not paying attention to our felt sense
Yes.
or all the time, right? And so that learning to replace attention on what's happening, not just in our bodies, but in our system, like, and in our emotional bodies, and like, what are we feeling? What are we noticing? Like, that's just a thing that many of us had as children,
Of
but then we
course.
lost access to. You said, what have we forgotten?
Yeah,
Uh, and I would say that is one of the things that we've forgotten.
absolutely. To have this sense of being in dialogue with
Yeah.
the body.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's so many things we had as young people that were not supported in our families of origin, in our culture, etc. Yeah, this sense of the wisdom of the body always being able to inform you and being completely
Mm.
unaware of that. Yeah, that was delightful. So what's the relationship between memory and embodiment?
Hmm. One important answer, I mean, I think there's many, is that memory can exist in our body, but not in our conscious awareness. And it exists in our body through the patterns, like the muscular patterns, the ways we contract, the tensions that we hold. I think it's easier to explain with a story because I think this stuff can sound really woo, and it's not woo. It's physicality. But a story that I'll tell is many years ago, I started to go to the gym, and I was working on especially like upper body. I mean, it was full body, but like a lot of upper body stuff. And every time I would do stuff with my pectoral muscles, right? Like bench presses or lifts, or, like often I would just like start crying. I had no idea why. It was so embarrassing, right? Because you're at the gym, it's all these bros, like dudes, and I'm like, and I would have to like walk it out. I was like, what is going on? And like what was happening later in retrospect, I figured it out, is that is where I held myself together as a young person. Like, I contracted my pectoral muscles, I compressed in along my midline. I was holding so much body tension there to hold myself together.
Yeah.
And so as I was strengthening those muscles and as they were getting exercised and worked, like there was a expansion out of that, right? And there was grief that was held in the body. And I didn't have a story for it, right? It was just like that protective mechanism that had kept me safe for so long. was finally feeling safe enough to relax. And as a result of that, there was this emotional aspect to it. So I think that's, it's one way memory gets held in the body. Another, I would say contraction, like tension, contraction, those patterns, which can lead to, if we're unaware of them, they can lead to pain and illness and disease, right? Um, I've worked a lot with folks with sexual trauma, and those contraction patterns will then like inhabit the pelvis. And one really beautiful part about those contractions is that it helps it's like holding us so that our attention can be free of that, right? This is like maybe some people would call this disassociation
Right. Yes.
or disembodiment, right? And so we don't have to put attention on it, but it's like it's still being held, my belief, so that when we're ready to do that release work and we're ready to do that healing work, our
Mm.
attention is directed back to where the pain is or where the numbness is or where the absence of sensation is. Once we're safe and when we have trusted guides around us that we can come back to the body through those uh like through what's missing.
Mm. So this is a good place to ask about ancestry work.
Hmm.
How would you pull ancestry work into the work, that sexual work, the disassociative space? What comes to mind when you're talking about this? I have a wonderful, wonderful friend, Leslie Michaels, who has passed. She was a channeler, an author, and just a badass, great friend. She was sexually abused as a child, and she believed that the disassociation that she experienced because of that trauma opened her up to be able to channel. So I think about, we never embarked in any kind of conversation around the healing of that trauma, the physical healing of that, and how she carried that in her body. So how can we weave in the ancestors into that conversation? How do you weave that into the work that you do?
Hmm. Some context is that when I was primarily working as a sex therapist, clients were coming into my office and saying things like, I have sexual trauma, my mom has sexual trauma, my grandma had sexual trauma, and I could help the individual through the things that I do, the somatic tools that I have. But I didn't know how to address the points of like, oh, this is like in a lineage. This is something that is passed down. We were talking about those burdens that are passed down. I was like, I don't know how to get at that. And so that was kind of the impetus for my doctoral research. But then the question that you're asking is, how do ancestors tie in? I mean, I think in lots of ways. One, um, just like really pragmatic, we model, right? We see something in our parents or in our grandparents, and we either model after it. So we kind of take on those mm, unconscious muscular patterns or emotional contractions, whatever it is, right? We take those things on, or we see them and we're like, oh hell no, that's not me. I'm not doing that, right?
Right? The
But
exact
and so
opposite.
then we're like reactive to it, but it's like it's shaping how we live based on just what we've seen. So that's really a very straightforward. Sometimes you'll see this happens out in the world all the time. I'll see a parent and a child, and they will have like a similar way that they're walking, or that they'll smile in a similar way, right? Like these patterns that we inherit or that we learn. And I think on a more esoteric, perhaps level, just because something happened in the past and there was trauma in the past, and this is where we're going to get to your friend Leslie, it doesn't go away just because someone dies. Like if there is a violation, a harm that is done, it doesn't just magically evaporate. And we can see this when, for example, we look at the history of this country, right? That the implications of slavery are still playing out, even though slavery is done, sort of
Yeah,
legally, right? The implications of that harm are transgenerational. Like in the incarceration of Black men is a
indeed.
great example of that, right? And so there's this if we acknowledge that things don't go away just because they're done happening or because that's in the past, if we acknowledge, oh, there's still like a ripple effect, right? That is one way we might see the impact of either sexual pleasure or sexual trauma, either, both, uh, coming down through our ancestors into us, right? To speak to the thing that you shared about Leslie, of like, yeah, the one of the impacts of trauma is increased sensitivity to all kinds of things.
Yes,
Like
indeed.
it can be hypervigilance, but it can also be like an increased sensitivity to the unseen realms,
Mhm.
like your friend had, right? And that can be, I mean, it sounds like for she, for her,
Mhm.
for Leslie, that she was able to take that, what happened to her, the impact of what happened to her, and alchemize it in her
Indeed.
body in order to like bring the gifts that it offered her. Not to say that like there weren't the harms, but there's also like what it offered, and she was able to make a life out of those gifts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just s- thinking about your book, and listeners, I have looked through the book, the whole book, but I chose not to read it because I want to do it. I read the beginning, the work, the ritual work, and the ancestral work. Um, and I'll let you describe the book, but I want to dig into this sense of the work, the ancestral unseen work, the reaching
Mhm.
back to the ancestors across the veil, and that the traumas, the emotional traumas, the physical traumas, the epigenetics of all of that. How I mean, it's one thing to sort of to see it, to hear that it has lived generationally. It what I'm trying to get at is how do you ritualize that with your clients? How do you work ritually to explore reaching across the veil?
Yeah. When I realized that I didn't have the right tools for the job, right? I could work with individuals with their lived trauma, but I didn't know how to shift it so, for example, they would not pass it on to their children. I had no idea how
Or
to do that. I realized that I didn't have those tools, and I went looking for the right tools, and I explored a lot of different um, kinds of tools. There's not a lot out there about transgenerational sexual trauma. There's just not. And everything that I found in cultures across the globe pointed to ritual. And so that's how I started to explore ritual. I mean, I was already a ritualist, so it was not surprising, but I hadn't thought about bringing like my work with sexual trauma clients and like my ritual work, like they were miles apart. Like it was not in the same realm at all. And so, yeah, I started to explore like different modalities
Mhm.
that work with ancestors, and um, and yet still like nothing was speaking directly to sexual trauma. And so I finally found ancestral lineage healing, Daniel Foer's work, and became trained in his approach early in his trajectory. And uh, he actually became one of my doctoral advisors, and his approach of like that you by your birthright are entitled to work with the your bloodline ancestors, right? Like you are entitled to help them get well, to heal whatever traumas have been passed down, to interrupt that, and to also send healing back towards them. Important point here is that it's not an obligation. You don't have to, right? If you are somebody who is listening and you've had sexual trauma and you're like, oh yeah, like I understand what Pami's talking about. You don't have to do this ever. You don't have to work on your own trauma. You definitely don't have to work on your ancestors' trauma. It's only if you want to. Personally, the ritual approach has provided me with great, uh, not only healing, but just like benefit in my own life, and in the continuation of the lineage through my children. Um, it because it then if you're not afraid to turn towards that, and a lot of people have really complicated relationships with ancestors, especially if the ones that they knew were assholes, you know. Like they don't want to be from those lineages or they don't want to relate with those ancestors. Let me just say that all the dead are not equally well. That in how,
Yes,
right?
for real.
They're just like we're humans, and so
Yeah.
some of us are like more healed and some of us are less healed, um and so often if there has been someone before you in the line who hasn't has either caused harm or experienced great harm and didn't do any healing work or couldn't do any healing work around it, there that can be experienced by the person alive today as a really heavy energy
Mhm.
and like maybe even like ghosty, possessy, yucky, icky. Don't want to do that. And maybe you've had experiences with uh that type of dead that you're just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So like I think the other piece is like ritual safety. Everyone who I interviewed, and I interviewed over 100 people in my research, from every different tradition you can possibly imagine. Um, and so many people spoke about ritual safety, about like how do you work with the dead in a way that doesn't get that heavy, that icky on you, or if it's already on you, how does you get it off
Get
of you
off.
so that you can work more effectively and so that the healing can pass through the lineage.
Mm. And all of that is explored in your book.
Yeah, it is.
Indeed. Yeah, it's so rich. My goodness. But I also think about storytelling and the power of your personal narrative and your personal healing narrative through ritual. Somebody who has, spent a life telling stories, exploring storytelling. I'm wondering if ritual is just another form of storytelling,
Hmm.
where we're talking not with words, but with our bodies, with our senses, with our reaching across the veil, if you
Mm-hmm.
were.
Mm-hmm.
Can ritual be a form of storytelling?
Yes.
Mm.
I'm grokking it as we in real time.
Yes, I love it. I was grokking it in real time when I was thinking about it.
Here's what I think about it. Like ritual. All right, well, we have to talk a little bit about like what is ritual.
Yeah.
Ritual action is to trust that there are forces beyond what we see and feel and experience. Maybe not experience, but beyond like the kind of the physical world that have power and meaning. So, for example, in a wedding ritual, right? Like two people are taking a ritual action to commit to uh, the invisibility, the intangibility of relationship, right? If like you can't see love, you can't like grab a
It
bag of
isn't,
it, right?
it's
But
indeed
there
an
we're taking
archetype.
right, we're taking this ritual action to like make something happen, right? And so I would say that like the one purpose of ritual is to make meaning. And I think in that is the closest place where it is storytelling. We're making meaning of it, right? We're making meaning of whatever we're doing in ritual. Like a funeral is another kind of ritual. Baby naming is another kind of, and these are rituals that are just like in the public sphere, right?
Right. And not, yeah,
Not necessarily
not reaching real
uh,
far and understanding.
right, right, not to a particular tradition or lineage or religion. And um, one of my teachers said to me, you don't have to feel a certain way in a ritual for it to be effective. Like you don't have to be like, oh, I'm so ecstatic, or like, oh, I'm feeling
Please.
this. Like you can take ritual action that is kind of neutral, like you feel neutral, and it still can be really effective, right? And so I would say in like, is that a type of storytelling? I don't know.
Yeah, I connected sort of to the transformational quality of rituals.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
That because I think of storytelling as being highly transformational,
Yeah.
um, in connecting people and connecting experiences and aligning the empathy and neural coupling and belonging, therefore belonging. So yeah, just I had never thought about ritual as storytelling, but it started to sort of take place in my mind thinking about your work. I just love that you combine this so profoundly and so deeply and so openly with all of the work that you're doing. It just makes complete and utter sense to me to combine it. And there it is in your book and easily accessed for everyone. It's just fantastic.
There's something I want to touch in on because when I was doing the review of literature for my work, I came across an organization called Wellbriety, and it's a organization that is indigenous led here in this on this land of North America, doing recovery work around um, addiction and but addiction as a transgenerational burden, and they're using ritual to transform the that burden into a blessing. And I remember reading about the ritual power of storytelling, of how like somebody would um, there was something that they were doing with like ribbons and sewing ribbons onto a shirt. Like you're telling your story, and as you're telling your story, each of the ribbons are representing a piece of your story, and your story is being witnessed in community and held in community, right? And so that there's this transformation that happens to you by being held in that way, by the naming, by the articulation, and by the holding. And another piece, I don't think it was from them that I read, was that like that there is the power of that ritualized transformative storytelling that you're talking about is helpful once. When people tell their trauma story on repeat, it's
Yeah,
not helpful.
yeah.
It's not helpful.
No, gets into
Uh,
identity.
yeah, it gets into identity. Exactly. We can form identity around any wound that we
Oh
have,
my, yeah. Well,
right?
that's why I
Yeah.
have some questions on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are they? Oh, baby. Yeah. I was thinking about this. I was like, so this addiction to healing and into healing work. And what's there's a paradox I have here. There's a paradox in our wellness culture. And I
Mm.
love that, that you say there's no wellness speak. I loved that. That healing can if it's like you're always healing, it becomes this, and you're not allowed to just simply live. You have to constantly be in a state of healing. I'm healing. I'm healing. So what is the thing that most that people misunderstand about healing?
Oh, it's so tied to identity and somatics. Okay. So the first step in anyone's healing, I would say, is the turning towards. Right? Instead of being in denial or minimizing or turning away from it, you're turning towards whatever is at the center of your suffering. And there is a point in healing where you get current, where you've grieved all your past griefs, you have acknowledged all your past harms that you caused, you have um, talked about your mom ad nauseum and you're bored with it, and like you feel like you're in your integrity. There's a point that you get to, just as with ritual work with the ancestors, there's a point that you get to where things are current, like the repair work has been done. And so there's this transition moment of recognizing like, okay, up until now, things are good. Like I'm good. I have done the work that I need to do up until now. It doesn't mean that there won't be more things that come up, right? But it means that like that it's helpful for me to bring my awareness towards others, like out of the uh I don't want to be like judgy, but I'm gonna be judgy. Okay.
Don't worry, we
Like
won't
the,
think you're
the
judgy.
spiritual narcissism of like,
Oh, that's
what's
not,
wrong with
that's
me?
for real. It's not judgy. It's for real.
Right? We could get so like caught up in, and it's just like navel gazing, and it's just like, oh, it's me, I'm broken. Like, no, fucking, you're living in
Yeah.
capitalism, you're living in
Thank you,
patriarchy,
patriarchy. For
right?
God's sake,
Ugh.
goddess's sake. Yes. Ah, totally.
Yeah. And like it's not serving the world, it's not serving others for you to be caught in that cycle of I'm broken, because it's
Right.
like you taking on more than your fair share of the debt.
Well, and it's also the narcissism. If you're addicted to
Yeah.
your wounding, you move in the world. You're getting special treatment
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. And you're not having to do the
Do
relational work of
the
showing up for
wholeness
others,
exactly?
showing up for others without caretaking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The difference
Oh,
between caring and caretaking? Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But it's also I'm propelled to ask this question because you brought up with the witnessing of healing
Mm.
and the being in ritual and being witnessed. Healing, however you define healing. I mean, being fine with your scarring and being current to
Mm.
your point. Um, my opinion is, well, I'm not going to share my opinion. What do you think? Can this becoming fine with your scarring, seeing it as beginning to see it as a point of wholeness, can that happen in isolation, or can it must it happen in community? I mean, if we're gonna uh, if we're going to find the benefits of how we might um, be less stressed about our trauma or our wounding, how it plays into our nervous system regulation. Um, can that happen in isolation or on one's own, or does it only happen in community,
Yeah.
or is it better in community?
I mean, I think not to be confrontational, but it's a lie we tell ourselves that we're ever not in community.
It's not
You know what
confrontation
I
in
mean?
the least. I love that answer.
And
Yes.
so I'm trying to think about I think it's valid,
Or maybe it's
however
perceived
it's
isolation.
happening,
Perceived isolation.
perceived isolation, right? But that's the lie we tell ourselves, right? That's
Yeah,
that
exactly.
anti-relational piece of like, oh, I don't have friends, I don't
Nobody,
have
I'm alone.
people, I'm alone. Or I'm like, who on this planet is, you might feel like you're alone. And that is a real experience of feeling like you're alone. And part of the work then is to let in love, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think that both are really valid. And if you were, like, let's say you were on a desert island by yourself and you were really in isolation and you really wanted to do, like, you can do healing work on yourself without relationality. I have clients all the time who come in, they've just had a breakup and they come into my office and they're like, before I get into my next relationship, I need to do work on my attachment stuff. And I'm like, great, we can do what we can do, and we're going to do some deep work. And then the rubber's going to meet the road when you get in your
Right.
next relationship.
Bingo. Yeah, your next, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes me think of a story. After I was ordained as an interfaith minister, I became a dean of first year students at the same seminary. And our first class of every year, the deans had to share our background and share, what our spiritual practices were. And I didn't even plan this the first time. The first thing that popped out of my mouth was a long-term marriage is my biggest spiritual practice. Just having
Yeah.
to be in that having that mirror
Yeah.
put up so intensely all the time.
Well, you're
Yeah,
lucky if you have that. That's a blessing to your life if you have that, because not everybody has that in their marriage.
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, they do, but they don't necessarily perceive it as like
The work or
the
the
work.
the
Yeah.
the the willingness that just because it's uncomfortable, yes, you do have to come to a point where you're like, yes, I realize that this is not a comfortable place, and I'm going to walk into it nonetheless and take a look. But I also feel safe enough to do that, so that is a blessing indeed.
Right. It's both. You need the
Yeah.
the tension, the
In my
distress a little
internal
bit,
intention to
and
be
then
vulnerable and
right.
the safety.
Yeah, both.
Yeah. I have a million more questions, Bethany,
Okay.
and I'm looking at the time. Um, I'm going to have to get you back because I do want to talk about your relationship work. But thanks for going down this path with me. So just a couple quick questions. What's one word your body has taught you?
Magic.
For those who for those who are just listening, I just threw up my arms in glee. Yes. What does freedom feel like?
I only get one word.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm really fucking good.
We can go with that.
Yeah.
I just feel really fucking good. What's a myth about healing?
That it has to be hard.
Practice everyone should try.
Breathing. I love this speed round.
Yeah, right, exactly. Breathing. There's the practice. Breathing consciously. Oh yeah, no, please. Breathing is such a big part of
Oh,
how
the other
I
practice that I really like is, especially now that gravity has worked on my face for 6 decades, is like to just to just turn up the corners of my mouth. It really changes things.
Oh,
You know, instead of this, like this is my resting face. I'm like, okay, just like turn up those corners, Pavani.
oh, yeah. Oh
And it
my.
really it's very helpful.
Yeah. Oh my. Okay. So now we're going to focus on our listeners. If someone listening has spent years disconnected from their body, that's
Mhm.
one gentle invitation you can offer today.
Pee when you have to.
Ooh, interesting.
Like don't hold your pee.
Well, at my age, I can't. Yeah, interesting. Do you come across like what is the downside of that? Like,
Finding good
do
public
people,
bathrooms.
I mean, do people actually like, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, people
Oh,
hold their
sorry.
pee a lot, especially people who are not super in their bodies. They will hold their pee and they will ignore it sometimes for hours. And it can, you know, obviously it can be a health issue. It's not good for you. Those folks are also chronically underhydrated. But I think like learning to pay attention to when your body is having a need um, is a gateway. Like that's a very simple gateway
It's
to
fantastic.
to
Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. The beginning to listen to your body, period,
Beginning to
through
listen.
that
Yeah.
simple step. Yeah,
Yes.
that's great.
I've had so many clients go through that gate to embodiment. Yeah.
It makes so much sense. One last one. What edge are you standing on in your own life right now?
I am having to pay so much attention to my body right now as I'm aging and as, you know, the aches and pains and infirmities of that are happening, as I am no longer able-bodied in the same way. And that attention on my body, you would think it would be like easy because I'm like, whatever, embodiment, la la la. But it actually takes so much, um, like I am being called to love myself in a new way that is very practical. Like, you know, 11 times a day I am taking Ayurvedic medicine. 11 times. And that's plus all the other stuff I'm taking, you know. And and that level of self-care and self-love is very hard for me to maintain. I think it would be hard for anybody, but it's just like can I love myself enough to do the things that will help my body not hurt, you know? And it's a significant edge as a, you know, punk from the 80s who's like moshing around to hardcore, like, what? And
So
and
with
having to really practice that love is so challenging.
I couldn't be more with you on that. You know, and each and every morning, like each and how you start your day. The days of willfully moving through stuff is over.
Over.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. So, give us a quick recap on tending the bones and what people can expect working with the book, and then where can we find you?
Yeah. So in a previous version of me in a different iteration, I was a Montessori educator. And that has been like kind of foundational, lifelong how I approach everything is through thinking about theories of learning and change. And so tending the bones is a very structured, slow-moving approach um, to bringing your awareness to your body, to magic, to ancestral ritual, and then to pleasure, sexual and erotic pleasure, and with space for all of it that comes up. So it's 13 moons.
I love that. 13 moons, people.
Yeah.
Not 12 chapters, 13 moons, peeps.
And so the book is just like a very gradual, and most of us don't have the patience to build the foundational skills. And I really wanted people to have that, because before you go into like ripping off the bandages, like you need to know how to fucking ground yourself.
Yeah.
You need to know how to put up a circle of protection. You need to know how to discern what's good for you and what's not good for you. Like, and these are all like foundational healing pieces that have to be in place before you go into like the more intense, like how do I create justice for me and my lineages? How do like there's right, how do I heal this trauma? And so it's very deliberate and slow intentionally from that like pedagogue's perspective. And I it's also an online course with recordings and the rituals recorded, and we meet several times quarterly. And so there is like a way to interface with me if folks are interested in that, and they can find that on my website, pavinimoray.com. That's probably the best way to get in contact with me. And I will talk to anybody for half an hour if there's stuff going on in your life that you want to see if it might be a good fit to work with me. Happy to talk with you, and you can schedule that on my website. So that's probably the best, and then you'll just get a better sense of like my work if this hasn't primed the pump. Um, you can go there and read a ton more about me.
Yes, indeed. And you are across social media.
I'm
And
not so much. I am, but I'm not so much on social media. I don't really like it. Other
mm,
than like cat videos, I'm rarely I write. I have a
you have a
Substack
Substack,
called
yeah.
I do. I write on Glitter Joyride. I
Great.
have a newsletter that's like
What's it
more
called again, folks?
Glitter Joyride.
Love that. I've read some stuff. Fantastic.
Yeah, the new podcast is coming out, and then I have like an email newsletter where I try and provide really like helpful things for mostly relationships.
Mm.
Yeah.
So there you have it, listeners. The glorious Dr. Pavini Moray. Any last words that you can impart?
The breathing thing was not a joke. It's really like such a amazing way to receive the pleasure of this world is to just look and breathe it in.
Amen. So it is.
And so it is.
Thank you so much for being on the edge of every day. And listeners, remember, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. The edge is where you come alive. Till we speak again, take good care.
Come on. Hey everyone, thanks again for spending time with us here on the Edge of Everyday. I'm so grateful for your support. Please hit subscribe and follow us. You can find me, Sandra Bargman, across social media. Links are always in the show notes. And please leave us a review at Apple Podcasts. Much gratitude to my inspiring guests. Thank you for sharing your challenges, your reflections, your wit and wisdom. And lastly, many thanks to Magic Thread Media and the executive coaching team at Create Magic at Work. Remember, the edge is where you come alive. The edge of every day.
Pressure pushing down on me, pressing down on you, no man has fall under pressure.
Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to a Magic Thread Media podcast.